Cheers and welcome to Irondale Brewing, and Happy New Year if you're watching this when it first gets released on YouTube. It's January 4th, 2026 as I'm recording this. And today we're doing a grain to glass of a Pliny the Elder clone. This recipe was generously shared with me by Josh from Fire and Ice Brewery, and Mark from Board Shorts Brewing. And they are a couple of my fellow Brewtubers, fantastic brewers. And this is a recipe that they have done many times and have it pretty dialed in. And I cannot overstate the benefit of being able to start from a recipe that someone else has done a bunch and really has it dialed in. Doesn't keep you totally out of trouble, as we'll see a little bit later in the video, but it was a fantastic place to start. And Josh and Mark are both great brewers, great friends from Brewtubers, and the generosity of the homebrewing community just never ceases to amaze me. Everybody's always willing to share and talk about how they do things and how they approach what they're doing and share recipes like this one, which is great. So I do want to talk a little bit about what Pliny the Elder is. If you're watching this, you're probably at least familiar with it. But Pliny the Elder is a double IPA, and that is a style that was pioneered by Vinny Cilurzo. I knew I'd screw that up, from Russian River. And a lot of people think Pliny was the first double IPA, but I did a little bit of research, and actually the first commercially available double IPA was developed by Vinny, but it was for Blind Pig Brewery, and he did a beer called Inaugural Ale, and for the opening of Blind Pig. This was pre-Russian River. And the reason, interestingly, that he developed this style was, it's kind of the necessity is the mother of invention thing. He bought a bunch of used equipment from a different brewery, and he was a little bit concerned about off flavors coming through in the beer. So he made this first beer, and it was, according to the stuff I read, his first commercial batch that he'd done, and the first batch that he'd done kind of on his own for Blind Pig. So he decided he wanted to put a ton of hops in this beer to mask any off flavors that might come out of process or equipment related issues. And so that's kind of how the style was born. He took his recipe for Blind Pig IPA, doubled the hops, and added about 30% to the malt bill. And this was the inaugural ale that they released at Blind Pig. And then the style kind of started taking off. I think Rogue had a double IPA in the mid to late 90s, and Stone Brewing was another one that was pretty popular back then. And then I think it was early 2000s, like 2001, there's a bistro in that area of California where Russian River is, Hayward, I think. And they decided they're going to have a double IPA festival, and there were 12 beers in there. And from what I read, the dates are fuzzy depending on what you're reading. That was that festival in 2001, if I remember correctly, was the first batch of Pliny was entered into that festival. So that's kind of the time frame we're talking about. And of course, Pliny is legendary now. It's at the top of all the beer ratings repeatedly. And it is fantastic beer if you can get a hold of some. I have a bottle shop near me that does get it from time to time. Unfortunately, they don't have any right now. I was hoping to do side by side just to kind of get a sense of how the two beers compare. But yeah, if you can get a hold of it at all, it's a fantastic beer to try. And a little bit of a side note, I stumbled across it when I was taking a trip to Las Vegas last year. I happened to go through the Santa Rosa airport, and they had, I think, 3 different Pliny beers on tap. So if you can route yourself through, if you haven't had any Russian River beers, and you can get yourself through Santa Rosa on your travels, that's a great way to do it. I'm going to read off some notes here because I want to make sure when I'm talking about the style that I don't miss a couple things. I'll try not to read too much if I can figure out how my tablet works. I think I have the whole thing upside down. Doesn't matter. There, it's working. So we talked about the history of the double IPA. In terms of the style characteristics and where it falls in the BJCP style guidelines, generally speaking, you're going to want an OG of around 1072, can be a little bit higher, can be a little bit lower, and final gravity around 1012. So you're shooting for like an 8-ish%, 8 to 8.5% beer, so big beer. And then of course, as the style name indicates, and if you've had any double IPAs, you know that the hops are the star of the show. You're going to want to shoot for 80 to 100 IBU. My calculated IBUs on this batch that I did went as high as 147. Those numbers are very fuzzy, as you probably know, but that's, kind of just to give you an idea of what to shoot for. And then the other thing I thought was interesting, a lot of the articles I read about Russian River talked about, highly guarded, secret, etc., which is not the case at all. Vinny has shared 2 or 3 recipes that I've come across that are directly from him on how to do Pliny at a homebrew level. He did a kit in collaboration with More Beer that you can go look at the recipe sheet for and see what they're doing. It does evolve from you know, from what I read, the hops change from time to time. And here's where the home brewing thing comes in, is that you can say, hey, I like Pliny, but I really like this hop. And if it fits into that overall West Coast double IPA, American sea hop kind of world, you can kind of play around with that. The other thing I do want to mention that just popped into my mind is that Pliny the Younger, which is the higher ABV limited release at the brewery only for 2 weeks a year, one of the interviews I read with Vinny, he said he initially thought Pliny the Younger was going to be lower ABV than Pliny the Elder, but still have a ton of hops. And he still said, I want to try that sometime. But the way they went for the initial Pliny the Younger is it's more 10 or 11% range. And so that's kind of how that beer fits in things. So that might be something to think about and try if you or want to play around with this and say, you know, I love the intensity of the hops in a double IPA, but the 8 or 8.5% ABV, I want to, you know, make that lower. So the other thing I want to talk about is a little bit of the characteristics of the style and kind of how to get, you know, again, according to the person who invented the style, the best results for a homebrew batch. Really what you want to do is keep the malt bill very simple, because again, the hops are the star of the show here. Don't want a lot of different malts. I compared many different recipes and the kit for more beer, and basically you don't want a lot of crystal malt. You want a little bit of crystal, 40 to 60, no more than about, let me look here. Well, I've seen everything from 2 to 5%, so pretty low. So not a lot of crystal malt, just some 2-row, and some carapils and some crystal. And then the other key here is dextrose, and a fairly hefty amount of dextrose, because with that amount of hops, you want the malt bill to have enough backbone to stand up to the hops, but you also don't want it to get overly sweet or overly malty and start getting muddled or in with the hops or even mask the hops. So the dextrose is there to really dry the beer out and give it a lighter body than it would otherwise have if you were doing all malt for this kind of beer. So keep that in mind as well. I'll talk numbers a little bit later here. The other thing I'll say is that if you want to kind of nail this style, you're going to have to treat your water. There's a lot of styles you can get away with just kind of doing, hey, I'm going to use spring water. Can work great in a wide variety of styles. In this style in particular, you can't really get away with using untreated spring water or whatever, because you need to get that sulfate to chloride ratio of at least 3 to 1. I've seen as high as 6 or 7 to 1 to really get that hop punch and that crisp hop bitterness that you're going to go for. And then you absolutely need to dry hop to get this style kind of in the wheelhouse of where you want to be. From what I've read, Pliny is dry hopped twice, which is kind of strange because they also make a double dry hopped Pliny. So maybe the original one is dry hopped once. And again, from what I've read, Russian River is always experimenting with stuff. They've done batches where they single dry hop, and if nobody notices, they'll say, well, maybe we can do it that way, which that's kind of what makes for a great brewer, if you're always kind of like experimenting to see what you can do here. So I think the only thing I really wanted to, other thing I really wanted to cover, I'll put some grain bill comparison on the screen. I think 3 that seemed pretty similar, but that'll give you an idea of where you want to be with the grain bill if you want to kind of take this and make it your own. As far as the hops go, I'll just, this is, if you're watching this video, kind of know what area of the hop flavor wheel you're in, but you're going to want to use, the classic American IPA hops. Chinook, Cascade is probably not used as much as you might think in some of these recipes, but Simcoe, CTZ, that kind of stuff. Of course, for the bulk of the bittering, if you want to use something more generic like Magnum or Warrior, that can work well too. And yeah, I think that's kind of all I wanted to do for a intro, just making sure I'm not missing anything here. And then I'll talk more specifics. In the brew day footage, there is, the specific recipe. Again, thanks to Josh and Mark, they not only were willing to share it with me, but said it was okay for me to include it in the video, and you can kind of get an idea of where we're at. So I think I'll stop there for now, and we'll just do some brew day footage on this double IPA, and I'll talk afterwards about kind of the major lesson learned for me as far as equipment and numbers and all that stuff. And so we'll do the tasting here after a few minutes. Hefty grain bill of nearly 16 pounds for this Pliny-inspired beer, 83.2% pale 2-row, 9.4% dextrose, 5% carapils, 2.4% caramel 40, and I threw in about 8 ounces of rice hulls just to make sure the recirculation was going to be good. I forgot to put my bag in here as well, so I was a little bit concerned.
since I grind pretty small and just oversight on my part. Dextrose, you're going to want to put that in a pan, get some hot wort in there, mix it up well. Don't just dump that powdery junk into your kettle. Run the risk of sticking, scorching, all sorts of stuff. And here we just see some shots of the boil with the steam hat on. 60% worked well not to get a hop explosion, so that was a good outcome of this brew day. Okay, now get out your credit card. A lot of hops in this beer. We had Chinook and Warrior at 60 for a total of 100 and some IBU. Simcoe, CTZ, and more Warrior at 5 minutes, and then Centennial and Simcoe at the Whirlpool. The recipe I got in Brewfather said 0 minutes, so I screwed that up a little bit and threw a minute flame out. And then I just chilled it down since I whirlpool while I'm chilling anyway. And, you know, so we got a pseudo whirlpool going on. Maybe less well planned than I would have liked. There you see it go in the fermenter. And let's talk fermentation next. Here it is in the fermentation chamber. Went with 1 packet of US-05. We'll talk about how well that went. Fermenting at 14 psi, 70 degrees. And the predicted OG was 1072. So a little more than 24 hours after pitching the yeast. The pill is unfortunately kind of being strangled or boxed in by the floating dip tube. So I don't know that the gravity readings are going to be super accurate because there's quite a bit of activity going on and the gravity's barely dropped. And I think it's just because that pill's stuck, but we're going to do about 14 PSI for this. So I may just have to kind of wing it and do it by time, and just give it plenty of time to get down to where I want it to be, guessing, and then dry hop. We'll put the hop bong on the top when we get to that point, and then we do a dry hop for 3 days, and a few days, probably about another week, and then cold crash and see how this sucker turns out. But that's where we're at after about a day. So 4 days into fermentation, we're about 50% done, a little more. Yeah, it's looking good. It's holding pressure steady. I, check it pretty regularly to make sure. It was at one point shot up a little bit over 15, but not bad. We're trying to keep it at 14. And yeah, not much more to say to that other than it's looking good.
It is finally time to dry hop the Pliny the Elder clone. And for our dry hop in this batch, we're going with 1 ounce and 3/4 of CTZ and another 1 3/4 ounces that is half Centennial and half Simcoe. Smells amazing. Gonna get the hop bong all sanitized and prepared for the pressurized dry hopping. So there's potential for danger here, which makes it pretty fun. Hop bong is ready. So the concept here is when I drop the temperature I raised it up to 74 to kind of bump it up a little bit and get a couple extra gravity points drop, which seemed to have worked. The pressure, when I dropped it back down to 65 Fahrenheit, went down to about 12 PSI from 14. So my idea here is I will take that SodaStream canister, I don't know, the angle's weird, we can see the hose going up into the hop bong, and I will do higher, like maybe 15 PSI, purge it a few times, and then with the higher pressure in the hop bong, when I open the valve, in theory the hop should go down there and it won't cause any issues. But this will be fun to watch because it could be a catastrophe. And I will try to stay out of the way as much as I can. It's very awkward shooting in here, but first things first, we're gonna just get some gas on the hop bong. If I can here. Okay, so it's about 15. Let's purge. Okay, that should be good. That's a little bit high. We're up at 20 or so. A little bit. Get those down a little bit. Okay, so now we're at about 15. And in theory, this should work. Higher pressure in the... I think I hear a very small leak somewhere, but it won't matter. It's not leaving this on there for long. But yeah, so in theory, higher pressure in the hop bong than what's in the Firmzilla, which is dropped to, it's about 12. Should mean that I can just drop these down, and I think I got enough in there that you can see if it is going to cause a volcano, we see a little bit of action there. So let us, I've only done this once before, I think I can just Sorry, I'm trying this down a little bit more to see if I can get that tiny little bit of leak I'm hearing to stop. I think it may be the PRV actually, which is interesting. Anyway, not a big deal. All right, so we're just gonna, it's still pressurized, so we're just gonna drop this and see what happens. I think I can push it down. Okay, and the hops are going down. Just shake it around a little bit, get them all down in there. All right, seems to be working. All right, we have dry hop. That was not the most elegant thing I've ever done, but we are dry hopped. Pull the valve back closed. All right, nice snap there. Then I will release or turn the gas off. Oops, that was off. That's not good. Okay, gas off. Release the pressure. Yeah, I think I must have just had a small leak up here, is where I was hearing it. So I don't know. I might not have it seated quite well. But then what I'm gonna do, I've got a couple extra hops in. We'll let those go. That's fine. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the hop bong off with the valve closed and just put this little cap back down on there with the, and I'll put a gas post on it. I won't film that, but that way it'll be ready to go from when I want to transfer. But yeah, that's a slick way to do it. I don't dislike the magnet method either. It's a little bit simpler, and if you plan ahead and get stuff in there, it's probably a little bit simpler to deal with. But this it's a nice setup. It doesn't take very long at all. So just gonna make sure that's off. And like I said, right or wrong, what I tend to do a couple times I've used this is I just take this thing back off. Again, check your pressures several times, make sure there's no pressure on the thing. And then I just take this thing back off. I'll let those couple of hops go. It's bothering me a little bit, but make sure your valve's shut, all that. Keeps it all oxygen free. So we'll take that off. Set that down for a second. And then I'm just going to take the lid back off. It actually has hops all the way up in there. I'll just kind of demonstrate my approach here. Not exactly earth-shattering, but put this down. And then basically I'll just put this back on here, but I'll put a, clamp it down and put a gas post on there. So that way I can put a little bit of pressure. I'm going to try to get this back up a little bit. It actually rose a PSI or two by doing the dry hop. And then when I cold crash, I can put a little bit of positive pressure on it when I bring it down to cold crash temp. So hopefully that was interesting to watch, but we'll see how this goes. The hop smelled amazing, just even while I was purging the hop bong, so I think this should be good. Beer's looking pretty good. Let me see if I can easily get a shot of that if I tip this down a little bit. So it's cleared up a lot. I let this go for a full 12 days before I dry hopped. Sorry, weird angle, looks like you're tilted. But I just really wanted to get down as far as we're going to get gravity-wise. It stopped at 1016, which that's fine for a double IPA. It was predicted to go a little bit lower by Brewfather, but I think Brewfather was horribly overly optimistic in terms of where this thing was going to wind up. But that should be good. I'm going to get that thing tightened up, and then I think the next thing, unless I film the kegging, will be the tasting. And here is the Pliny-inspired beer. I named mine Vanquished by Vesuvius because, fun fact, Pliny the Elder, and the reason the beer's named that, I didn't mention this in the beginning, is because Pliny the Elder is one of the first people to write about hops. And Pliny the Elder went to go rescue a friend of his from an island, I can't remember the name of it, while Vesuvius was erupting, and that's how he died. So I thought Vanquished by Vesuvius was an interesting name. Anyway, this is the beer. You can see it's got, and I think I'll take in fact, I already took a little bit shot of the coming out right out of the kegerator, so the pint doesn't look exactly the same. You'll know why. But you can see it's a really nice kind of orangey golden color. It's not super clear. I wish it was a little bit clearer. The bottom of the glass is pretty clear. The bulk up here, it's a little bit, maybe a little bit hazy, and I don't think that's just condensation on the glass. So I wish it was a little bit clearer, but let's talk about the aroma. Yeah, so this was pretty heavily dry hopped. As we talked about, I think it was 3.5 ounces, something like that. So the aroma is pretty intense hop aroma there with the kind of classic West Coast fruity, piney thing going on the nose. So that's really nice on this beer. And a little bit on maltiness, because again, this is a pretty hefty beer. Mine came out to be 8.3%, I think, because my original gravity was 1077, and the final gravity was 1014. So it's it's pretty big beer. So I do get a little bit of maltiness on the nose as well. But yeah, mostly hops. So that dry hopping again is super important for that hop aroma. Yeah, I think I'll just take a taste. This pint versus the one I poured the other day, the head is nice and white, but it is not hanging around as much as the one I poured the other day. But generally speaking, it has pretty good head retention. But I'll quit rambling. We'll take a taste here. Yeah, so obviously hops all day long. The hop intensity, it's not. When I tried this, this beer's been in the keg about a month now. When I tried it initially, it was very, very like over the top intense, which is kind of interesting because, and Josh said this too. He thinks it hits its stride in his experience at about a month in the keg. Generally speaking, if you read about these sorts of beers, you want to drink them fresh. So that might be something that's a little bit might be worth a little investigation. But yeah, it's the hop bitterness it's very, very, very hop forward, and it is pretty intense, but maybe not as much as you would think. It's a very drinkable beer, even though, like I said, Brewfather calculated the IBUs to be 147, which is insane, and I don't, it gets pretty meaningless once you're above about 100 anyway. So let me take another taste here and see how I can pick this apart. So the mouthfeel on this, I would say, is, I put it at medium. I wish it was lighter, and I'll talk about why it's not lighter than it is in a second here. But it definitely has enough malt backbone to stand up to the level of hops. The hops kind of come in pretty strong at the tail end of your gulp, and then definitely they hang around quite a lot after in the finish and in the aftertaste. And there is a little bit of malt sweetness on this one that I get in the aftertaste. And I'll just talk about how the brew day went here for a second. So I did use, well, let me just talk about what I used here. So for context, it wound up being 83.2% two-row, 9.4% dextrose. So that's pretty high. The other recipes I've looked at are more like 5% dextrose, 5% carapils, and 2.4% crystal 40. I've seen as high as 4% crystal in some of these. I'm just looking at the other ones I have here. But these are all kind of, in the wheelhouse. The biggest difference between the recipe that I made and some of the other ones I see is that the dextrose is quite a bit higher. But here's what went off a little bit in my brew day. So I have never done a double IPA ever, and I did not anticipate the tremendous amount of liquid that the hops were going to absorb. So with that, with that many hops, much hops, with that number of ounces of hops in the batch, so Brewfather does not take that into account. My understanding is that Beersmith might, but Brewfather just has True Bloss as a setting in your equipment profiles, and if you don't take that into account and change that, if you're going to use, say, double or triple the number of hops you normally do, you will be surprised at the size of the volume of liquid going into the fermenter, which in my case was 3/4 gallon lower than what I was shooting for. So I wound up, instead of 5.5 gallons going in the fermenter, I wound up with 4.75 gallons going in the fermenter. So as you can imagine, not only does that kind of throw the hop intensity out of whack a little bit, but also the mouthfeel is going to be a little bit heavier and I thought about watering it down, but then I'm like, this first time I'm doing this, I'm going to see how it goes. So then I have kind of some data to work from. So anyway, I think that accounts for the mouthfeel being a little bit heavier than I would want it to be. use plenty of dextrose. It's just that you know, the 3/4 of a gallon less liquid is making this a little bit heavier in the mouthfeel than would be ideal. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with this as a first attempt. Obviously, now I know, you know, the lesson, big lesson learned here is take your hop absorption rate into account. I created a separate profile after I got this batch done in Brewfather that's just a copy of my normal one, but I named it high hop, and I put, instead of the True Bloss being a half a gallon, I put it up to a gallon. That'll be at least closer. And the interesting thing is, I think the recipe that Vinny shared in Zymergy back in like 2009, he even said, like, he accounted for that. He's like, you got to call your batch, if you want 5 gallons at the end of the whole process, your batch size is going to be 6 gallons, not the normal kind of 5.5. So that should put me in the right ballpark. Had I done a little bit more research or asked more questions of Josh and Mark, hey, do I need to be worried about anything here? But hey, I don't mind learning stuff kind of the hard way either. So, but overall, I think this is a pretty decent attempt at a double IPA. I really wish I had a bottle of Pliny to compare it to. Not that I think my beer would even approach the level of quality of Pliny, but just kind of from a characteristic standpoint, are we kind of hitting the marks? And the hops are different in this one as well. I do like the addition of the Chinook hops in this early on. It's pretty nice. But yeah, I think, for a first attempt at a double IPA and trying to clone one of the most revered beers in the world, not bad. And again, most of the credit goes to Josh and Mark. They did the hard work of getting the recipe dialed in. And I think the other thing, sorry, taking a pause here, because the other thing I'm noticing in the finish now is after I've had a few sips, the spicy, peppery notes in the hops come out a little bit more than I noticed them initially. So for me personally, I might dial that stuff back a little bit, take a look at the hop bill and say, hey, where's the spicy and peppery stuff coming from, and maybe lower that a little bit. I would also be kind of interested. This makes me probably just the basic beer nerd instead of doing anything super adventurous. But I would also be interested in what a little bit of Citra hops in this would do. I think it could work well and might be an interesting twist on kind of this base recipe. I personally love Cascade and more of the piney, more dank hops. That's kind of what I grew up with, so to speak, in the craft beer world. But I do also love Citra, so it would be interesting to kind of balance that stuff out. Citra and Simcoe work really well together. There's some Amarillo in here as well. Anyway, tweaking that stuff for my taste would be interesting. And it could just be that, given that this beer is I think out of whack is just the best way to put it. I had, like the volume difference and some other things. It's not bad. It's just kind of like, you want to wrench some stuff back into line a little bit more. But yeah, I think I'll probably just leave it there. But I hope you enjoyed hearing my experience and watching my experience brewing a double IPA. First one I've done. I will definitely try it again. It is fun to brew. So if you've ever had Pliny or another double IPA that you enjoy and you're homebrew, give it a shot. It's not, for me, a bigger leap would be me trying to brew like a New England IPA. I think there's a whole lot more stuff going on there than there is with a West Coast double IPA in terms of stuff you have to worry about and all the. I'm working up to that. I do want to brew New England IPA at some point, rite of passage if nothing else. But yeah, if you are into IPAs, it's a lot of fun to do. Be aware your grains are going to weigh a ton. That is the most grains. I think it was almost 16 pounds. That's the most grains I want to put in my Brewzilla without having my pulley set up. That was like on the edge of what I want to stand there holding while it drains. And I forgot my bag, which didn't help either. But anyway, I think I'm rambling. I'm going to go finish this beer because it is actually quite nice. Great hop aroma. And a little bit of malty sweetness on the nose. Just doing another summary here. And yeah, excellent. Very, very hop forward, intense, but not, tear your face off. Doesn't, stay on the tongue too long. I just wish the body was a little bit lighter. And next time I do it, I might tweak the hops a little bit more to my preferences in this stuff. And then I can share that back with Josh and Mark, and they can say, oh, you're crazy. Or they might be interested in trying some different stuff as well. And that's what homebrewing is all about. So cheers. Thanks for watching. Happy New Year again. I don't know what my next video is going to be. I was going to do a grain to glass on a peppermint mocha stout, but holidays got in the way and I haven't even brewed it yet. And now thinking about the fact I'd be drinking that in like March, it doesn't sound particularly appealing. So I may skip that one. I have a Janet's Brown Ale I wanted to do. I may do that one next. And then I do have in the works for probably 2 batches from now, a pale ale that I'll talk about in the future, but I think it's going to be really interesting. So cheers, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.